Okay, something else that needs to be discussed when referring to functions in general, but right now we're talking about exponential functions. And again, the reason this is an exponential function is because the input is an exponent. If we were looking at the function y equals x squared, even though this function has an exponent, this isn't an exponential function because the exponent is just a constant. An exponential function is when the exponent is the input variable. So now let's talk about something that is important when referring to functions, and that is domain and range. The domain of any function is just a set of inputs. In this case, we're talking about x's. Set of inputs. What are all of the inputs that are feasible or allowable to put into this function? Well, 2 can be raised to any power. There's no number that you cannot raise to 2. So the domain of this function will be all real numbers. All numbers. The only numbers that you know about are real numbers. So the x can be, in other words, x can be anything. That's all it's saying. How about the range? Well, the range is the outputs, all of the outputs that you end up getting as a result of, so all x can be any real number, that's the domain. The outputs, the range is all of the outputs that result from putting all the inputs that you can into the function. Well, notice all the points on this function, you always end up with a positive output. Y will never be negative. Y won't ever even equal 0 because the graph will not ever get down to where y equals 0 on the x-axis. So the range of this function, y, is always positive. So the domain, x can be any real number, any number, but the range, y will always be a positive number. Let's look at domain and range of these two. The blue function, the domain is going to be, the domain and range of y equals 3 times 2 to the x are going to be the same as they were for y equals 2 to the x. Multiplying by 3, x can still be any number, and y is still going to be a positive number. But this red function, the domain of this red function, the x's, x can still be any number. So the domain is still all real numbers, but the range of this red function, since we're multiplying those powers of 2 by a negative number, y always ends up negative to this red function. So the range would be y is always negative for this guy. And we need to think about domain and range. Domain and range is something we always need to think about when talking about functions.